Welcome to a tale that will haunt your dreams, where shadows come alive, reflections deceive, and escaping the darkness might just be impossible. This is the story of Liam and Emily, and the nightmare they could never wake up from. Liam and Emily had always dreamed of owning their own home. After years of saving and searching, they finally found what seemed like the perfect place. A modest yet charming two-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The house was old, with a classic wooden porch and ivy creeping up the sides, but it had been well maintained. It felt warm, inviting, a fresh start for them. The first few days were filled with the usual chaos of moving in, unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and getting accustomed to the creaks and groans of an old house settling. They laughed about the occasional flickering light and the way the floorboards in the hallway seemed to shift under their feet. Emily chalked it up to age, while Liam joked that maybe they had a ghost. But even then, there were little moments that made Emily pause. The subtle feeling of being watched when she was alone in a room. The way she'd leave a cupboard closed only to find it slightly ajar later. She told herself she was imagining things, that it was just nerves from the stress of moving. Then came the first real sign that something wasn't right. It was their third night in the house. Liam had fallen asleep early, exhausted from hauling furniture all day. But Emily was restless. She lay in bed, scrolling on her phone when she heard it, a faint creaking sound from the hallway. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned her head toward the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. The light from the hallway cast a faint glow inside the room. Another creak. It sounded like footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Emily's heart pounded. She held her breath, listening. The house was old, yes, but this wasn't the sound of wood expanding. This was movement. She sat up, gripping the blanket. "Liam," she whispered, nudging his shoulder. "Do you hear that?" Liam groaned in his sleep, barely stirring. Then suddenly the sound stopped. A thick silence settled over the house. Emily exhaled slowly, telling herself she was overreacting. Maybe it was just the wind outside, or an animal scurrying along the porch. She lay back down and forced herself to close her eyes. The next morning she found the hallway light on. She was certain they had turned it off before bed. "Liam," she said over breakfast, trying to keep her voice casual. "Did you get up last night?" He shook his head, spooning cereal into his mouth. "No, why?" "The hallway light was on when I woke up." Liam frowned, setting his spoon down. "Are you sure you didn't leave it on?" Emily hesitated. "I remember turning it off." Liam shrugged. "Maybe it's a wiring issue?" "These old houses have weird quirks." Emily nodded, but the uneasy feeling in her stomach didn't go away. That night she double-checked every door, every light. She even placed a small stool in front of the bedroom door. If someone opened it during the night, she would hear it move. At 2:47 a.m., she woke up gasping. She had the sensation of something pressing down on her chest, like an invisible weight pinning her in place. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. Her breathing came in short, panicked bursts as she strained to break free from the paralysis. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. A shadow, tall, unmoving, standing in the hallway. It was just outside the doorway, barely visible in the dim light. Her eyes flicked to the stool, untouched. The door hadn't moved. She wanted to scream, to wake Liam, but no sound came out. The figure remained still, featureless, watching. After what felt like an eternity, the pressure on her chest lifted, and she jolted upright with a gasp. She turned toward the hallway. Nothing. The shadow was gone. Her breath came in ragged gulps as she reached for the lamp on the nightstand, flicking it on. The room filled with warm, reassuring light. She shook Liam awake. "Emily?" he murmured groggily. "There was something in the hallway," she said, voice trembling. "I swear to God, Liam, I saw it." Liam rubbed his eyes and sat up. "You probably had sleep paralysis," he said, though his voice held a note of uncertainty. Emily shook her head. No, it was real. Liam got up and checked the hallway, even though she knew he wouldn't find anything. He returned a minute later, rubbing his arm. There's nothing there, Em. But Emily barely slept the rest of the night. The next morning, she decided to record everything. She set up her phone on the hallway table before they went to bed, angling it so it would capture the entire length of the corridor. She wanted proof. The following morning, with shaking hands, she picked up the phone and played back the footage. At 2:46 a.m., the video showed the empty hallway. Then, the shadows at the far end began to darken. A shape emerged, tall, elongated, moving without sound. It glided toward the bedroom door and stopped just outside. Emily watched, frozen, as the figure stood there, not moving, just watching. Then, without warning, it snapped its head toward the camera. The screen went black. Emily's stomach lurched. She nearly dropped the phone. Liam, she whispered, voice shaking. Come look at this. Liam watched the footage with furrowed brows. When the screen cut out, his face went pale. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. That's messed up. Emily turned to him. You believe me now? Liam hesitated, but then nodded. Yeah, I do. They spent the day researching the house's history. There was little information online, but Emily found an old newspaper article buried in an obscure archive. It mentioned a disappearance, someone who had lived in the house decades ago, a man who had vanished without a trace. No foul play was suspected. No evidence was ever found, just gone. That night, the house felt different, heavier, like the air itself was pressing in on them. Every noise made Emily flinch. At 3 a.m., the camera in the hallway shut off on its own. At 3:02 a.m., the bedroom door creaked open, and Emily felt the weight on her chest return. This time, she wasn't sure if she would wake up. Liam and Emily had spent the day in near silence, haunted by the footage they had seen that morning. The figure in the hallway, the way it had turned toward the camera, the way the screen had gone black just as its presence became undeniable. Emily's mind raced with possibilities. Was it a ghost? A spirit tied to the house? A shadow of something worse? Liam, always the skeptic, had tried to rationalize it, but even he had no real answers. That night they decided to stay up, determined to witness the disturbances firsthand. They positioned themselves in the living room, their laptop connected to the house's security cameras, and waited. It started subtly. At 12:30 a.m., a faint tapping echoed from the upstairs hallway, a slow, rhythmic sound, as if something, or someone, was knocking on the walls. Emily shuddered. It's starting. Liam swallowed, trying to steady his breathing. Let's see if we can catch it on the feed. They stared at the laptop screen, their eyes fixed on the grainy, black and white feed of the hallway. At first, nothing happened. The hallway remained empty, eerily still. Then, at exactly 12:47 a.m., a door moved. Not much, just a slight creak. Emily's fingers dug into Liam's arm. Did you see that? Liam nodded, his throat dry. Yeah. The door to the guest room, a room they never used, had shifted open an inch, then another inch. The camera flickered, and for a fraction of a second, a shape passed across the screen. Emily gasped. Liam, rewind it. Liam fumbled with the trackpad, scrolling back frame by frame. There, in the dim footage, a shadow stood just inside the doorway. It was impossibly tall, its form elongated and unnatural. No features, just darkness. And then, in the next frame, it was gone. The air in the living room thickened. Emily shivered. It's not just moving things, it's here. It's watching. Liam exhaled slowly. We need to go. But before they could even stand, a loud crash erupted from upstairs. Liam shot up, grabbing the flashlight. Stay behind me. Emily hesitated but followed as they crept toward the staircase. Every step sent a fresh wave of dread coursing through her veins. At the top of the stairs, they turned toward the guest room. The door was now fully open. The crash had come from inside. Liam held up the flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. Hello? Then, slowly, impossibly, the temperature in the hallway dropped. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, her breath coming in short, visible puffs. The flashlight flickered. Then, from deep within the room, a whisper, a voice, faint, inhuman. Emily! Emily's breath hitched in her throat. Liam snapped off the flashlight, grabbed her hand, and pulled her back. We're leaving. Now. They bolted down the stairs, their feet barely touching the steps. Liam yanked open the front door and stopped. Emily crashed into him. Liam, what are you? Her words died in her throat. The street outside had changed. Gone were the familiar houses of their neighborhood. Gone were the streetlights, the parked cars, the distant glow of the city. Instead, stretching before them, was an abyss of blackness. The world beyond their porch no longer existed. Emily staggered back. No, no, no. She turned to Liam, panic rising in her chest. Liam, what's happening? Liam stared into the void, his face pale. We're trapped. Then from behind them, the whisper returned. The front door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed them. Emily's scream barely left her lips before she felt it. Something brushing past her. An unseen force. A presence so close she could feel its breath on her neck. Liam fumbled with his phone, the screen casting a weak glow. Emily grabbed his arm. Turn on the lights. But the switch didn't work. Nothing worked. Then, in the dim light of the phone, Emily saw it, standing in the hallway, watching. The figure. It had no face, no eyes, but somehow it was staring directly at her. And then, it moved. Not with footsteps, not with any human motion. It simply glided, as if reality itself bent around it. Emily backed away. Liam, do something. Liam threw his phone, the device sailing through the air, only for the shadow to vanish before it made contact. A heartbeat later, the phone crashed to the ground. Emily grabbed Liam's hand. We have to run. They sprinted to the kitchen, but every door, every window was gone. The walls stretched endlessly, shifting and warping as if the house itself was alive. Emily turned, gasping for air. We're not in our house anymore. Liam ran his hands through his hair, his chest rising and falling in shallow, panicked breaths. It's changing. It's keeping us here. Then, a deep, guttural voice echoed through the air. You are home. Emily clutched her head, pain splitting through her skull. The voice wasn't just sound. It was inside her, crawling through her mind. Liam grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. Emily, look at me. Stay with me. She fought to focus, to push past the fog clouding her thoughts. The shadow was gone, but it wasn't over. The house groaned, shifting. Doors reappeared, but twisted, distorted, leading to impossible spaces. Liam pointed to the stairs. Upstairs, the attic. It was the only place left unexplored. The one door they had never opened. They ran, taking the steps two at a time. Reaching the attic door, Liam yanked it open. Inside, the space was impossibly vast, larger than the house itself. An expanse of darkness stretched endlessly, the air thick with an unnatural energy. And there, in the center, stood the figure, waiting. It lifted a single elongated hand, and Emily felt her body being pulled forward. You belong to me. She fought, struggled, but an unseen force dragged her across the wooden floor. Liam lunged, grabbing her wrist. I won't let you take her. The entity tilted its head, amused. And then, the world shattered. The walls, the ceiling, everything exploded into darkness. Emily screamed, and then woke up. She was in bed. Sunlight streamed through the window. Birds chirped outside. Emily sat up, her body trembling. Liam stirred beside her, groaning. Emily? You okay? Emily looked around, heart pounding. The house was normal. The hallway was normal. Had it been a dream? But then she saw it. A single black handprint on the bedroom wall. and she knew it wasn't over. Emily's body was still trembling as Liam held her close. She was back. He had pulled her out of it. Or so he thought. Her breathing was shallow, her skin clammy against his. But her eyes, her beautiful, familiar eyes, had returned. For a moment, everything was still. And then, a whisper, low, twisted, from behind them. Emily's entire body seized, her hands clenched into tight fists, her spine arching in pain. Liam barely had time to react before her lips parted, and an unnatural shrieking voice tore from her throat. "I'm not done with her." Liam stumbled back in horror. Emily's body lifted off the ground, her limbs twisting unnaturally. The air around her vibrated, pulsing with dark energy. Her mouth opened wider than humanly possible. A black void churned inside. From within, something moved. A hand, a clawed, grotesque hand. It was crawling out of her. "Emily!" Liam lunged forward, grabbing her shoulders, shaking her. Her body jerked violently, her eyes flickering between normal and pure, soulless black. Then, everything around them twisted. The walls melted into darkness. The basement was gone. They were somewhere else. A void. No up, no down. No ceiling, no floor. Just shifting shadows and whispers. Emily collapsed, gasping for air. Liam grabbed her, his heart pounding. "We have to wake up. We have to get out of here." Emily's eyes darted around in terror. "Where are we?" The whispers grew louder. And then, from the darkness, eyes opened. Dozens, no, hundreds of them, watching, waiting. And then, the whispers turned into screams. A wave of black figures surged forward, crawling, reaching for them. Their elongated limbs stretched unnaturally, fingers twitching. Liam grabbed Emily's hand. "Run!" They sprinted through the void, but the landscape shifted beneath them, warping like a living nightmare. No matter how fast they ran, the shadows kept pace. Emily sobbed. "We're not escaping." Liam's mind raced. They weren't in the real world anymore. They were inside something else. Inside it. And it wasn't letting them go. The house had been a trap, a doorway to something far worse. Suddenly, Emily screamed. Liam turned just in time to see something wrap around her ankle. A long, blackened hand. It yanked. Emily vanished into the darkness. "No!" Liam dove after her, but the floor ripped apart beneath him, swallowing him whole. Liam hit the ground hard. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. His head pounded as he sat up, groaning. He was no longer in the void. He was in a house. But it wasn't their house. Not exactly. It was twisted. Wrong. The walls pulsed as if breathing. The furniture was rotting, covered in black veins. Everything felt off. And then he heard it. Emily, screaming. Liam's body reacted before his mind could catch up. He ran down the hallway, his footsteps echoing unnaturally. The air grew heavier. A door stood at the end of the hall. Emily's screams came from inside. Liam threw it open. Inside, Emily stood in the center of the room, but she wasn't alone. Figures surrounded her, dozens of them. Some were missing limbs, some were stretched unnaturally tall. Some had no faces, but they were all whispering. Emily's body was stiff, her arms locked to her sides. Her eyes were wide with pure terror. A dark shape loomed behind her. The entity, taller than before, stronger. It was feeding off her. "Get away from her!" Liam roared. The figures turned in unison. Emily's lips moved, but it wasn't her voice that came out. It was the entity's. "You shouldn't have come back." Liam's breath hitched. "Let her go." Emily's head tilted unnaturally. "She's already mine." Liam clenched his fists. "Like hell she is." And then, he charged. Straight at Emily. Straight at the entity. The moment his hands grabbed her, the world collapsed. The walls shattered. The figures screamed. Liam felt himself being torn apart. When Liam opened his eyes, he was back in their bedroom. His body ached. His breath was ragged. Emily was beside him, still unconscious. For a moment, he thought it was over. But then, he saw it. The handprint. Bigger than before. Darker and moving. The black veins spread across the wall, crawling like living tendrils. Liam's stomach twisted. It wasn't over. It would never be over. A cold whisper slithered through the air. "You can't escape." The light bulb overhead flickered violently. Liam turned to wake Emily and froze. Emily was staring at him, but her eyes were black again. And this time, she was smiling. Liam's breath caught in his throat. Emily's blackened eyes locked onto his. She wasn't moving, just watching. The smile on her lips was wrong, slow, unnatural, not hers. Liam's heartbeat thundered in his chest. For a split second, he froze. Then, Emily tilted her head, her neck cracking at an unnatural angle. A voice, not hers, not human, crawled from her lips. "You thought you could take her back." Liam took a slow step backward. His hands were trembling. No, this isn't real." Emily's smile widened. "Real?" she whispered. "You still think there is real?" The air in the room shifted. The walls breathed. The ceiling light flickered, casting twisted shadows that moved independently. Liam clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay grounded. Emily was still in there. He had to reach her. "Emily," he said, his voice shaking. "If you can hear me, fight this. You've fought it before." Emily's expression flickered. For the briefest moment, her lips quivered, a spark of recognition in her dark, soulless eyes. Liam's pulse jumped. "Emily, I know you're in there," she jerked. Her body convulsed, her arms twisting as if something inside was struggling to break free. Then, a scream, not human, not hers. A deep guttural howl that made the walls tremble. The darkness poured from her mouth like thick smoke, twisting into tendrils. Liam's stomach lurched. The tendrils reached for him. He stumbled back, but they moved too fast. They coiled around his wrists, his neck, his chest. Liam woke up gasping, but he wasn't in their bedroom anymore. He was back in the house. But it wasn't the same. It had shifted. The walls were too long. The doors were too tall. The air was thick, humid, suffocating. And the whispering, constant, endless. Liam pushed himself up, his head pounding. His arms burned where the shadow tendrils had touched him. But Emily was gone. Panic surged through him. "Emily!" His voice echoed. Too loud, too wrong. Then, a whisper. Close, right next to his ear. "She's waiting for you." Liam spun, but no one was there. A single door stood at the end of the hallway. Slightly open, darkness leaked from the cracks. Liam's body screamed at him not to go inside, but he had no choice. He had to find Emily. Slowly, he stepped forward. The floor creaked beneath him. The walls seemed to pulse, as if something was breathing inside them. When he reached the door, he hesitated. Something was moving on the other side, scraping, shuffling. A whisper. "Come in." Liam's hand trembled as he reached for the handle, and then he pushed the door open. Inside, the room was empty, except for one thing. A mirror, tall, ancient. Its surface rippled like liquid, and in the reflection, Liam saw Emily. She was staring at him, but something was wrong. Her reflection was smiling, but she wasn't. In the real world, Emily stood motionless, her eyes wide, blank, terrified. She was trapped inside. "Emily!" Liam ran forward, pressing his hands against the glass. Her lips moved. "Liam, help me." But before she could finish, her reflection moved on its own. It grinned, and then it reached out. A hand burst through the glass. Liam barely had time to react before the reflection grabbed his wrist. It was ice cold and wrong. He tried to pull away, but the reflection was stronger. The glass melted, turning into thick black liquid, and then it pulled him inside. Liam landed hard. The air was wrong. Everything was inverted. The colors were muted, desaturated. The shadows moved on their own. And Emily, she was right in front of him, but she wasn't alone. The entity loomed behind her, its arms wrapped around her shoulders like a puppeteer. Its long fingers curled around her face. Liam's blood ran cold. Emily's eyes were normal again. Wide, terrified. She was still in there. Liam clenched his fists. "Let her go." The entity laughed. Its voice was 1,000 voices at once. "She belongs to me now." Emily shook her head, trembling. "Liam, don't listen to it. I'm still here. Please." Her voice cut off. The entity's fingers dug into her skin and she screamed in agony. Liam saw her veins darkening. It was consuming her. He had seconds to act. His eyes darted around, looking for anything. Then, his gaze landed on something. The mirror, still intact, still watching. The entity was hiding in reflections. It was trapped in them. And if it could be trapped, it could be destroyed. Liam acted on pure instinct. He grabbed a shard of broken glass from the ground. The entity's head snapped toward him. "What do you think you're?" Liam plunged the glass into the mirror, shattering it. The world imploded. The entity screamed, writhing. Emily's body jerked violently. Liam gasped. He was back in bed. The room was silent. No whispers, no shadows. The air was still. Beside him, Emily, sleeping peacefully. Liam's body shook. Had it been a dream? A hallucination? He reached out, brushing Emily's hair back. She was warm, alive. She stirred slightly, mumbling in her sleep. Liam let out a breath. It was over. Liam's body froze. A soft, gentle tap, coming from the closet. Slowly, mechanically, he turned his head. The closet door was open, and inside, 2 glowing eyes stared back at him. And then, Emily's voice, software pleading. "Liam, that's not me in the bed." Liam's breath caught in his throat. Emily's voice, soft, trembling, had come from the closet. But Emily was beside him in bed. His pulse pounded. "Liam." The voice came again, barely above a whisper. "That's not me in the bed." A cold wave of dread swept through him. He turned his head slowly. Emily, the one in bed, was motionless, too still, too perfect. Then, she smiled. Liam's stomach twisted violently. Her lips stretched too wide. Wrong. Not Emily. Not human. His body screamed at him to run, but he couldn't move. Emily in bed opened her eyes. Black. Pure, endless black. And then, she lunged. Liam barely had time to react before cold hands wrapped around his throat. He gasped, struggling as she pinned him down. Her strength was inhuman. Her fingers dug into his skin. He thrashed, his vision blurring. The edges of the room darkened. He was going to die. Then, a sharp, piercing scream. The thing on top of him jerked. Its grip loosened. Liam gasped for air, coughing violently. He turned toward the closet. Emily was standing there. The real Emily. Her eyes wide with terror. "Liam, get away from it." The thing in bed twisted its head toward her. Its mouth split open. Too wide. A dark, inhuman voice slithered out. "You shouldn't be here." Emily grabbed something from behind her. A mirror shard. The same mirror from before. Without hesitation, she threw it at the creature. The glass hit its skin, and it screamed. A sound that wasn't human. The flesh on its face melted, twisting into shadows. Liam scrambled backward, watching in horror as the thing convulsed violently. The blackness peeled away, revealing something beneath. A mass of twitching, writhing limbs. Not a person. Never a person. Liam grabbed Emily's hand. "Run!" They raced down the hallway, but the house was changing around them. The walls shifted, stretching. Doors vanished. The air grew heavy, suffocating. And behind them, the thing was following. its limbs elongated, skittering unnaturally, its grotesque, half-melted face twisted into something almost human, but not quite. "You can't leave." The whisper slithered down the hallway, crawling into their ears. Liam yanked Emily toward the stairs. They barreled down, their footsteps echoing. The front door, it was there, wide open. The outside world looked wrong, blurry, shifting, but it was their only way out. Liam pushed forward. Then, Emily screamed. Something had grabbed her ankle, a shadowed hand. The entity's hand was pulling her back. "No!" Liam dropped to his knees, grabbing her arms. Emily clawed at the floor, struggling. The entity's voice was everywhere. "She's already mine." Liam's hands tightened around Emily's wrists. "No!" he snarled. "You don't get to take her." Emily's eyes were wild with terror. The darkness was consuming her. Liam had only seconds to make a choice. Then, he remembered. The mirror. It had reacted to the entity. It had heard it. Because it was a reflection. And the entity, it was trapped in reflections. Liam turned his head, scanning the room frantically. And then, he saw it. The hallway mirror. Still hanging on the wall. Still intact. With every ounce of strength he had left, Liam twisted, grabbed a loose brick from the fireplace, and hurled it at the mirror. Crash! The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the entity screamed. The sound was inhuman, piercing. The shadows tore away from Emily, unraveling. She gasped, collapsing into Liam's arms. The house shook violently. The walls cracked open, revealing pure void beneath. The entity was unraveling. The house was collapsing. Liam didn't hesitate. He lifted Emily, pulled her toward the door, and they jumped into the void. Liam's eyes snapped open. Sunlight. The soft hum of birds outside. For a moment, he just lay there. His body ached. His head was pounding. But he was alive. Slowly, he turned his head. Emily was beside him, sleeping, peacefully. His breath shuddered. Had it all been a nightmare? Had any of it been real? Liam slowly sat up, rubbing his face. The room looked normal. The house felt normal. And yet, a deep unease lingered in his chest. Then, Emily stirred. She blinked slowly, looking at him, and smiled. A real tired smile. Not like before. Not like the thing that had been pretending to be her. Liam let out a shaky breath. It was over. They were safe. Emily reached for his hand, squeezing it. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to relax. Then, his gaze drifted to the bedroom mirror. It was cracked. Not shattered. Just a single jagged crack running down the middle. His stomach twisted. For a long moment, he just stared. And then, his reflection moved. Before he did, it smiled and whispered, "You never left."